Hey yo, it's Generation Crypto. Now today we're going to be talking about Safemoon Reflections and the mathematics on how you can calculate your reflections at different prices and volumes. This was a highly requested video by the Safemoon community. Recently, I have been involved in different Safemoon Twitter spaces, most notably Safemoon After Dark, which usually begins most days at around 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The hosts of that space, Chris Harris and El Patron, have done an amazing job of allowing the community to have an open dialogue about the project. It was actually because of that space that this video came about. So if you want to have the opportunity to talk to other holders of the project, feel free to check them out on Twitter. So to get started, let's briefly review Safemoon's tokenomics before we begin. Safemoon had an original total supply of 1 quadrillion tokens. However, after the release of the version 2 of the Safemoon contract, the total supply is reduced down to 1 trillion tokens, and all tokens held by individual holders reduced by a ratio of 1,000 to 1, meaning for every 1 billion tokens held in V1, 1 million tokens will now be held in the V2 version of Safemoon. For more information on what consolidation is, click the link to the video that is appearing on your screen now. One of the main elements of the Safemoon project that it originally became known for is its tokenomics, where there is a 10% fee for every transaction of Safemoon. So if you buy $100 of Safemoon, you will receive $90 of Safemoon, and the other $10 will be applied towards the Safemoon tax, or the tokenomics fee. Of the 10% total tokenomics fee, half at 5% go to the liquidity, which is not the focus of today's video. So if you'd like me to do a video about liquidity pools, or more specifically, liquidity pools in relation to Safemoon, let me know in the comment section down below. The other half at 5%, which is the focus of today's video, are dedicated to redistribution, commonly referred to as reflections of tokens, to all holders, with the Safemoon burn wallet being considered one of those holders. Each holder receives these reflections based upon the percentage of the total supply their wallet holds. This is calculated by dividing the amount of tokens in your wallet by the total supply of Safemoon, which for V2 would be 1 trillion tokens. That division should result in a decimal point, which you should convert into a percentage of the total supply by multiplying that number by 100, and that is the percentage of the total supply your bag holds. This calculated percentage is commonly referred to as the weight of your wallet. So the more Safemoon in your wallet, the more reflections your wallet will receive due to the weight of your wallet increasing after more tokens are added to it due to reflections. This also applies to the burn wallet. The function of the burn wallet is to permanently remove tokens out of circulation, where those tokens become unrecoverable as the wallet lacks a private key and therefore cannot be accessed. So the more tokens in the burn wallet, the more tokens it will burn due to the weight of the wallet increasing. This will continue to happen until the development team of Safemoon decide to stop the burn and the burn wallet is prevented from receiving further reflections. Once this occurs, this will dramatically increase the amount of reflections other wallets receive, as the burn wallet will no longer be taking a portion of the Safemoon reflections. So the tokens that would have been going to the burn wallet will instead be distributed to all other wallets. This means instead of your wallet receiving reflections based upon the percentage of the total supply your wallet holds, it will instead be based upon the percentage of the circulating supply your wallet holds. To find out what the circulating supply is, you would just need to subtract the amount of tokens in the burn wallet from the total supply. For example, if the burn wallet theoretically held 800 billion tokens and the total supply was 1 trillion tokens, after subtracting 800 billion from 1 trillion, you would be left with 200 billion tokens in circulating supply. So again, theoretically, if the dev team decided at this point to stop the burn wallet would be removed from the pool of wallets receiving reflections. So the amount of reflections your wallet receives would then stop being based upon the weight of your wallet compared to the total supply, and then be based upon your wallet's weight compared to the circulating supply. In this example, the circulating supply is now 200 billion and will remain 200 billion as the burn wallet will no longer be receiving reflections. To calculate the weight of your wallet compared to the circulating supply, you would use the same mathematics as before when calculating the weight of your wallet against the total supply. So you would divide the total amount of tokens in your wallet by the circulating supply of 200 billion and should get back a decimal. You would then multiply that decimal by 100, and that would be the percentage of the circulating supply your bag currently holds, which is the new weight of your wallet. So you would receive that percentage of the total amount of reflections distributed to holders. Under the current example, that would mean your reflections should be 5 times more than they were before, as the percentage of the total supply your wallet holds is now 5 times more than previous due to the total supply receiving reflections being reduced to 1/5 the original. So now that we have gone over how reflections work and how the burn wallet affects reflections, let's go over how you can calculate your own reflections. The first thing that you need to decide when calculating your reflections is if you want to find out how much Safemoon tokens your reflections will yield or the USD value. Now, the way we're going to calculate this will first show their USD value, and I can then show you how to convert that to the actual number of Safemoon tokens that USD amount is worth. To start off, we first require determining the amount of USD is being used to transact Safemoon. On many Safemoon reflection calculators, as well as other videos explaining the calculation of Safemoon reflections, the daily volume is the number commonly used for this value. Daily volume is a common cryptocurrency and stock term that refers to the value of the total number of stocks or cryptocurrency coins or tokens traded within the last 24 hours. With Safemoon, the tokenomics tax is included in that calculation. For this example, let's say the daily volume is $200 million. We would then need to determine what amount of that daily volume was used for reflections. We know that with Safemoon, 5% of all transactions are used for reflections. So to find out how much of the $200 million of daily volume is used for reflections, we would need to find out what 5% of $200 million is. We can determine this by one of two ways. We can either multiply 200 million by 0.05, which is the decimal representation of 5%, or we could divide 200 million by 20, as 1/20th is the fractional representation of 5%. Solving this using either method will result in the same answer of $10 million. So now that we know that $10 million of the total $200 million of daily volume was used for reflections, we would now need to determine how much of that will be going to your wallet. To determine this, we will first need to calculate the weight of your wallet as previously described in this video by dividing the amount of tokens in your wallet by the total supply of Safemoon. Using V2 numbers with a total supply of 1 trillion tokens and with a wallet holding 1 million tokens, we would divide 1 million by 1 trillion. This will give us a result of 0.501, which if converted to a percentage by multiplying that number by 100 and adding a percentage sign behind it would tell us this wallet is 1/10,000th of a percent of the total supply. So now that we know the amount of daily volume going through reflections and the weight of our example wallet, we can now determine how much that wallet will receive in reflections by multiplying the weight of the wallet by the total number of dollars going to reflections. This would give us a result of $10. So with $200 million of daily volume in V2 of Safemoon and having a wallet with 1 million Safemoon, the wallet would receive $10 worth of reflections. To determine how many Safemoon tokens that is, you would simply just divide $10 by the current price of Safemoon. So if Safemoon at this time was worth 1 penny, remembering that this is after consolidation, that would mean that $10 of Safemoon is 1,000 Safemoon tokens. So after reflections are added to our example wallet, it would now hold 1,001,000 tokens. This math that we just did could be represented in an equation as VR multiplied by I over S, where V represents daily volume, R represents the percentage of tokenomics dedicated to reflections, in Safemoon's case being 5%. I represents the initial size of your wallet, or rather the amount of tokens in your wallet commonly referred to as your bag size, and S represents the total supply of the token. This equation gives us the dollar value of the reflections received. To determine the actual number of tokens this is worth, you would simply need to divide this entire equation by the current price, which we could show here as represented by P for price. The cool part about this equation is it can technically be used for any token that uses tokenomics to give our reflections. However, it is important to note that if the reflections are paid out with another crypto, the price you would divide it by is the reward token and not the initial token. Because of this, it is significant to note that your initial bag size of your token would not increase since the rewards are paid for with another token or coin. It will be the coin or token that will continue to have a growing bag size, but it will not be exponential like a token that pays with its own coin or token like Safemoon. This equation, or some variation of this equation, is also what is commonly used for most Safemoon and other rewards token calculators when determining reflections. Except for there is one major flaw with our equation and the example that we just used. To calculate our reflections, we began by using daily volume, which is a common occurrence when calculating reflections. However, at least with Safemoon, reflections are not paid out once daily based upon the daily volume. Although it is true that having a higher daily volume will lead to higher daily reflections and lower daily volume will lead to lower daily reflections, the reflections are actually calculated and distributed at every transaction and not once daily. This means the compound factor of Safemoon Reflections happens not only on a daily basis, but actually after every transaction, meaning the weight of your Safemoon wallet grows after every transaction before the next transaction, and therefore the next set of reflections are paid out. This means the amount of reflections you would receive at the next transaction is slightly higher than the previous transaction. This basically means that your reflections receive reflections along with your initial holdings at each transaction over thousands of transactions per day. This is commonly referred to as a compound effect. So by calculating with daily volume rather than by per transaction, you are actually calculating fewer reflections than you would actually be receiving. To change our equation to be more accurate, we would need to switch out the V for volume with a T for transaction value. Then the equation could be used to determine reflections after one transaction rather than 1 day's worth of volume. Now, to be fair, with low daily volume and with smaller bag sizes, the difference between calculating after every transaction for thousands of transactions per day versus using daily volume to estimate daily reflections is going to be mostly negligible. When we try to determine future reflections over longer periods of time, such as weeks, months, years, or especially decades, the difference in those calculations continues to be barely marginal unless you are calculating larger bag sizes. However, for many people, the difference between a few hundred or a few $1,000s over time, regardless of how marginal they may be, is significant to them. To calculate this equation on a repetitious basis, take into consideration the compounding bag size and the increasing of the wallet after each transaction. We can calculate this using the following equation. B equals I plus TR multiplied by I over S all divided by P, where B represents the bag size, I represents the initial bag size, T represents the transaction volume or value in dollars, R represents the tokenomics reflections percentage, once again being 5% for Safemoon, S represents the supply, and P represents the current price. Essentially, what this equation does is it takes the same equation we were using before to calculate reflections and adds the reflected tokens to our initial bag, giving us our new bag size after reflections are received. To repeat this sequence, we simply replace I in this equation with B after every iteration. This will help us to account for the recalculation of the weight of the wallet for each iteration, as well as keep track of reflections added after each iteration as well. This process can be repeated as many times as desired to simulate reflections. If you try to do this on your own, you can plug this equation into Excel or Google Sheets to predict and track your own reflections. For those that are familiar with light level programming, basic programs can be written to calculate this data as well. If anyone is interested in examples of that code, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. The only issue with calculating reflections is doing so in an accurate fashion. It is nearly impossible to accurately predict reflections. This is because in reality, every transaction will vary in its USD value, and the amount of frequency of transactions is also nearly impossible to predict. Even if you had several days with the exact same amount of daily volume, technically speaking, it is nearly impossible that those days will have had the exact amount of transactions with the exact same value per transaction. This means that the further out you try to predict reflections such as weeks, months, and years, the more room for error and variance there becomes. Even if you try to somehow find average transaction sizes and the average amount of transactions per different daily volumes, over time, your predictions will become less and less accurate, not to mention extremely complex to calculate and predict. This is why many reflection calculators just use daily volume to base their predictions. Simply put, it's impossible to count the randomness of transaction frequency and size. So just know, when you're using a reflections calculator, the predictions you are receiving are conservative estimates and become less accurate the further out you use them to predict reflections due to the fluctuation of all the variables involved. It's also important to note that the value of Safemoon tokens also will fluctuate over time, which will change the value of Safemoon tokens in USD you have received over time in reflections. To give an example of what I mean by this, let's use our previous example where we calculated the reflections for a bag size of 1 million Safemoon tokens with a daily volume of $200 million. We came to the conclusion that we would just be getting about $10 in reflections. Of course, since we use daily volume, this number would be slightly inaccurate, although not by a significant margin for just 1 day at this volume and bag size. We also used in our example the example price of 1 penny per Safemoon token, as this is after V2 consolidation. So this would mean that the wallet received 1,000 Safemoon tokens. However, what would have happened had the price been higher or lower than 1 penny? Everything else remaining constant? The wallet still would have received $10 worth of Safemoon, but the amount of Safemoon tokens would have changed. So at a Safemoon price of 5 cents, the Safemoon wallet would have only received 200 Safemoon tokens worth $10. Assuming a lower price of half a penny, the Safemoon wallet would have received 2,000 Safemoon tokens worth $10. So going back to our originally received 1,000 Safemoon tokens at the price of 1 penny per token, as the price of Safemoon goes up over time and eventually becomes worth 5 cents, those original 1,000 Safemoon token reflections would have changed from being worth $10 to being worth $50. Just like the rest of your tokens in your bag will also appreciate in value, the price of Safemoon is volatile, just like most other cryptocurrencies. This means the price can vary substantially throughout the day. So not only are you having to deal with fluctuating transaction frequency and size when calculating reflections, but also changing price, which affects the value of Safemoon tokens you are receiving and have received in the past. So in a real-world setting, it is nearly impossible to accurately predict Safemoon reflections without manually calculating every single transaction, taking into consideration the price of Safemoon during each transaction, as well as the frequency and value of each of those transactions. Now, knowing all this, I want to show you guys how over time, calculating and predicting reflections does have a slight variance in your predictions over time. Understanding that all variables involved here are complex and will affect the value and amount of reflections you receive and their value over time, as well as your bag size over time, we're going to simplify this by leaving some variables unrealistically consistent to isolate how the frequency of which you calculate reflections has an impact on how many you receive. To do this, we are going to compare reflections that are done once daily based upon daily volume, once hourly based upon daily volume, where the volume is broken up evenly hour to hour, with an understanding that volume on an hourly basis is extremely unlikely to stay the same. Then for our last comparison, we are going to have reflections calculated 10,000 times per day, again at equal intervals, knowing that those intervals being equal is extremely unrealistic. We will assume for the duration of this simulation that the daily volume is $1 billion a day, which is high for Safemoon's current daily volume, but in line with the top 10 cryptocurrencies currently on market. We will also assume the current price of Safemoon is 1 penny and never changes, which is also extremely unrealistic when considering the burn wallet. Also, each of the 3 example wallets will start with 1 million tokens of V2 Safemoon. After the first day of the simulation, we find that there is already a difference between these 3 variables, although the difference is extremely small. After day 1, the once daily wallet has earned exactly 5,000 Safemoon tokens in reflections worth $50. The hourly wallet has 5,011.99 reflections worth $50.12, and the 10,000 transactions per day wallet has 50,012.52 reflections worth $50.13. We can see from this data already that the more transactions calculated with the same volume leads to a higher reflection count, but it appears the more transactions there are, the less significant those additional gains become. After 1 week or 7 days, we find that the daily wallet has received a total of 35,529.4 tokens worth $355.29. The hourly wallet has received 35,615.93 tokens worth $356.16, and the 10,000 transactions per day wallet has received 35,619.7 tokens worth $356.20. So after 1 week, we continue to see the same pattern laid out by the first day, when the wallet with more transactions with the same volume is favored to receive more reflections, but the advantage gained continues to be marginal. After 1 month or 30 days, we find the daily wallet has received a total of 161,400.08 tokens worth $1,614 even. The hourly wallet has received 161,816.09 tokens worth $1,618.16, and the 10,000 transactions per day wallet has received 161,834.2 tokens worth $1,618.34. So after an entire month, the difference between calculating at daily volume versus 10,000 transactions per day is only a difference of $4.34, starting with 1 million V2 Safemoon tokens at a $1 billion daily volume. Of course, these are oversimplified comparisons, not taking into consideration other factors. It goes to show that a smaller or average bag size, even at a high daily volume, has a difference that is mostly negligible, but still goes to show that there is indeed a difference. This is probably why many people who program calculators prefer to use daily volume to simplify an already complex calculation. If we graph the entire month on the line graph, the 3 lines representing the 3 wallets are so close in value they appear to be the same line. The lines displayed also appear to be going in a mostly straight direction, as the compound element of reflections has yet to really take effect and become visible. Let's take a look at what these reflections would look like using our same example after an entire year. After that year, the daily volume would have now received 5,174,652.78 tokens over the course of that year. This number does not include the original 1 million tokens the wallet started with, just the reflections the wallet has received. These reflections would be worth $51,746.53. Of course, in a more realistic situation, the price of Safemoon would most likely have been forced to go up due to the $365 billion in volume the project experienced throughout the course of that year, which would have been knocking billions of Safemoon tokens out of the circulation. This would have meant that previously received reflections at a lower price would now be more valuable, as would of course the total value of your current bag. The hourly wallet, however, after 1 year has received 5,201,616.12 tokens over the course of the year. Once again, not including the original 1 million tokens starting in the wallet. These reflections would be worth $52,016.16, with the last wallet running the 10,000 transactions per day for a grand total of 3,650,000 transactions throughout the course of that year. That wallet would have received 5,202,792.19 tokens worth $52,027.92. So after a full year, the difference between calculating reflections once daily versus 10,000 transactions per day with equal volume and value between transactions, we find that calculating reflections more often leads to a higher amount of received reflections, the difference between these two being worth $281.39. Graphing the year on a line graph for these three equations, we begin to see the curve in the line as the compounding factor of reflections takes place. If you look closely, you can also see at the very end that there begins to be some separation in our three lines as the growing difference between them becomes visible on the graph. Of course, in a realistic situation, as the price of Safemoon was increased due to the volume and burn, the value of all reflections received would have also increased, thereby meaning that the amount of Safemoon tokens received as the price increased would have gone down. However, their USD value would have remained the same, but the previously received reflections value would have also increased. This means reflections received now at a lower price will become more valuable over time, assuming we see prices increase. A major theory and question that has come up when it comes to Safemoon reflections is whether having several smaller bags is more advantageous to yielding more reflections over just one larger bag. In order to test and make sure there was no advantage over time, I ran a simulation of 10 smaller bags and one larger bag, where the combined value of the 10 smaller bags was equal to the one larger bag to begin with. After simulating 36.5 million transactions, I can confirm that there is no benefit or detriment to splitting up your bag or by holding all your tokens in one larger bag, as reflections payout is identical. However, do note that when transferring to smaller bags, your transactions are still subject to tokenomics and gas fees. I do want to note that when using the equation I have given in this video and while calculating over long periods of time, make sure your simulated bag size does not exceed the circulating supply, as one bag cannot hold more than the circulating supply. This is because the supply outside the circulating supply is in the burn wallet and is unrecoverable. Therefore, no other wallets can hold them. Therefore, not one bag holder can hold more than what is in the circulating supply. Realistically, it is also nearly impossible for a bag to even get close to the value of the circulating supply due to the tokens in the liquidity pool and the fact that the chance of all other holders selling while the project is still active is extremely unlikely. Another thing to note is that Safemoon should soon be, or may now be, depending on when you watch this video, allowing transactions that only apply a 2% tokenomics fee. This would not apply to all transactions, but would apply to the use of the Safemoon card for real-world purchases and other internal transactions. These 2% tokenomics would still break down proportionally to the 10% tokenomics, where 1% of the 2% would go towards reflections and the burn. These types of transactions could help lead to higher volume because of the lower fees, although the amount of reflections received from these transactions would of course be lower due to the fact that they are 1/5 the usual tokenomics fees. If you are looking for a good calculator to give you a general idea of what your reflections could theoretically look like, one of my personal favorites is Glubiz calculator on his website safemoonglubiz.com. He is one of my favorites due to its easy to use interface. Just remember that when using any calculator, these reflection calculations are purely estimates and are generally going to be more conservative due to how they calculate the reflections. The longer out you try to calculate, the higher the volume, the more variance in price, and the larger your bag, the more inaccurate those predictions will become. A link to Glubiz calculator will be in the description of this video. If you've made it this far into the video, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, and I hope this video was able to answer some of your questions when it comes to Safemoon Reflections. If there's anything that I missed or that you would deem inaccurate, please let me know in the comment section down below. Thanks for watching, guys. I know this was a longer one, so if you've stuck around to the very end, I greatly appreciate it, and I will catch you in my next video.